What is going on, you guys? This is DerekJ Speaks, and we are back again for the second time this weekend to talk about wrestling. And this time, we are talking about WWE Evolution 2025 live from the State Farm Arena in Atlanta, Georgia. And on this show, this all women's exclusive PLE show, the main event of Rhea Ripley challenging Iyo Sky for the Women's World Championship. At the end of this match and the end of the night, we have a brand new Women's World Champion, and her name is Naomi. As Naomi interrupted this match, cashed in her Money in the Bank contract, and won the Women's World Championship. What an unbelievable moment this was. And as someone who is so beyond over and tired of the Money in the Bank gimmick and the cash-ins and the ladder matches and all of that stuff, I'm ready for WWE to take a break from it or even retire it altogether. As someone who's very much over it, I gotta say, even now, they still get me with these big moments, with these cash-ins, and this one on this show, on this night, was very, very cool to see. Mainly because I genuinely did not expect it. I, like many people, have been calling for Naomi cash-ins to be for the women's title on SmackDown against Tiffany Stratton, or even if Jade Cargill were to win it, maybe against her. Not once did I ever truly consider the option of Naomi cashing in for the Women's World Championship on Raw, especially not on this show after what they did. So hats off to WWE for genuinely pulling off a huge shock at the end of this show. A show that top to bottom was absolutely incredible. This, to me, with no hyperbole, I mean, maybe there's a little bit of recency bias considering the fact that as I'm recording, the show just went off the air like 5 minutes ago. But I can confidently say, I believe, that this is hands down the best WWE event of the entire year. Out of all their PLEs, all the Saturday night's main event shows, all the big stuff that they've had this year, out of all the crazy content that they have overloaded us with over the past couple of months, this was the best out of all of them, which is ironic considering the fact that this was the worst built-up show out of all of them. This is the show that had the least amount of effort or energy or care put into building it up, into prepping it, into putting a card together for it, into putting any kind of great, interesting stories or uniqueness to this card. They just felt like a huge amount of laziness in terms of WWE building up to this show. So, plus having it take place the same weekend as AEW All In, and just being one of 3 shows that WWE were using to flood the market and oversaturate everything and drown out the noise of All In, which, even as great as this show was, did not work. This weekend still belongs to AEW All In, and it still will. Although doing something like this definitely puts a lot of attention on WWE. But in spite of all of that, all that shit goes out the window, because this show was great because of these women going out there and putting on unbelievable matches. Literally every single match on this show, all hits, not a single miss. There is not a single match on this show that I would call bad. And even the worst match on this show, which was probably the Battle Royal, was still a lot of fun. It was your standard Battle Royal, but it was still a whole lot of fun. And now seeing who won that match, and with Naomi now as being the champion, if that is going to be a championship match for Clash in Paris, that will be a very interesting matchup. Because again, it's something I didn't even consider as a possibility. That's the fun of having Naomi come out at the end to cash in Money in the Bank the way she did and win the championship. It sets up so many different avenues and possibilities for the future on that show. So I'm excited for it, and I'm excited to get into this entire show. Now, originally, I planned on this review being a double review to talk about Saturday night's main event from last night and then also talk about Evolution. I'm not going to do that. I want to pretty much keep this exclusive to Evolution because the show was that damn good. But I will give quick thoughts on Saturday night's main event in that I don't really have many thoughts on Saturday night's main event because much like a lot of the other shows in the past, it was flooded with a whole bunch of commercial breaks and the in-ring action was very weak. But it was noteworthy in that we now have a new SummerSlam match set up as Randy Orton teams up with Jelly Roll, country musician, to take on Logan Paul and Drew McIntyre. And of course, people have many thoughts on that. We had a match that got stopped. Well, not stopped, but it ended very early with LA Knight and Seth Rollins due to an apparent injury to Seth Rollins' knee. He appeared to have tweaked his knee in the match, and the match went right to the finish with LA Knight hitting the BFT and getting the win, and Seth looking visibly both pissed off and scared of what could be a devastating injury to him and a devastating blow to the overall creative team, as they have built a lot around Seth Rollins and his new group on Monday Night Raw. So we still don't know. As of this recording, we don't know the updates on him. I assume we'll hear it on Raw tomorrow night, so we'll stay tuned for that. And then in the main event, Gunther retained his world championship over Bill Goldberg in Goldberg's retirement match, and they went 14 minutes, which was a surprise to me, but seeing as how the Rollins LA Knight match ended early, I imagine some of that time went to them, and Goldberg did not embarrass himself. He hung in there as well as he could, even with his bad leg, but that was a far better way for him to go out than anything he could have ever asked for. So good on him for getting the farewell that he desperately wanted. So with that out of the way, let's place our focus back on Evolution and let's tackle this card from top to bottom because it was great enough to deserve that. So at the very top of the show, we were introduced by Joe Tessitore, who had Stephanie McMahon with him. So they were kind of the hosts of the show. They cut to them a few times every now and then to give their thoughts on the card and the show up to that point. And of course, commentary was Wade Barrett and Michael Cole. And our first match of the night was the triple threat match for the Women's Intercontinental Championship. Becky Lynch defending against Bayley and Lyra Valkyria. Becky and Lyra have been putting on some great matches on the past couple of PLEs. They had a great match at Backlash. They had another great match at Money in the Bank. So you knew at least the two of them had great enough chemistry to put on a damn good match here. And then you throw in Bayley, and that definitely made the match even more exciting. And for as great as the in-ring action was, the crowd elevated this match even more. You're going to hear that repeated a lot throughout this review because the crowd was the sixth man, or however you want to phrase it. They were the glue that held this show together. The ladies went out there and killed it. All their matches, they worked their asses off, but this crowd was hot for damn near everything on this show. And this opening match, they were just on another level. When that bell rang, they were going crazy for these three women, and they didn't even touch yet. And so as the match went on, they were super into it. They were really, really into Bayley. This was a pro-Bayley crowd on this show. They liked Lyra, and they hated Becky, which is good since she was the heel. But they were super into Bayley in this match. But the atmosphere for this match in general was just so much fun. And like I said, that's not even to take away from the in-ring action because that was also really great. You had a lot of the standard things that you would expect in a triple threat match with different finishers, people hitting moves on each other, and one person getting taken out on the floor. So you get a singles match for a little bit. You get someone hitting their finisher. Another person comes in and breaks it up. A lot of that standard stuff, but it was just done really well. And the finish really wasn't much of a surprise to me, as a series of roll-ups back and forth between Bayley and Lyra led to Bayley getting the upper hand and hitting Lyra with the rose plant. But then Becky swoops in as Bayley's covering Lyra. Becky swoops in and kind of backslides her into a roll-up and gets the win. So Becky pins Bayley and retains the Intercontinental Championship. Like I said, my words don't really do it justice. This was a great match, a great way to open up this show. And with Becky pinning Bayley, I assume this is going to lead to a proper conclusion between Becky Lynch and Lyra Valkyria, possibly at SummerSlam. And if I had to venture a guess, I would say they do that match at SummerSlam, and if they do it and they want a stipulation, might I suggest something like best 2 out of 3 falls. I think we have enough plunder and weapons and hardcore matches between both companies. I don't necessarily need this to blow off in one. They might do it, but I think just doing something like 2 out of 3 falls could also work too. So that's my prediction as far as that's concerned. Up next, we had the NXT Women's Championship on the line. Jordynne Grace taking on Jacy Jayne. Now, you know I never really talk about NXT. That's because I don't really watch NXT. I follow the product enough. You know, Tuesday nights when I'm doing other things, I have my phone open on Twitter/X and following along with the results of what's going on with NXT. And sometimes I tune in, sometimes I talk about it, other times I kind of just leave it alone. But this program here has been interesting to follow along with Jacy Jayne being the NXT Women's Champion, and of course Jordynne Grace having the backup of the debuting Blake Monroe. And of course, for all of you nuanced fans, that is the former Mariah May from AEW. The two of them teamed up on the Great American Bash show that took place yesterday at the same time as All In, and on that show, Jordynne Grace and Blake Monroe got a win over Fatal Influence, with Blake pinning Jacy Jayne in that match. So here tonight, Blake was out there in Jordynne's corner for this match, and you knew shenanigans would follow, and that's exactly what happened. The match itself was very good. I haven't seen a lot of Jacy Jayne's matches over the years, but from what I have seen, I think this was probably her best performance. And Jordynne Grace, I mean, she's a very great wrestler, so not much of a surprise that the two of them put on a pretty good match here. Not one of the best matches of the entire night. It was probably one of the ones on the lower tier of the list, but still a very good match in its own right. But the finish saw interference from Fatal Influence. That's Jasmine Hicks and Fallon Henley. They were trying to interfere, and Blake Monroe was fighting them off. But then we get to a point where Blake steals the championship belt. I believe Jasmine Hicks was holding the belt, and Blake kind of knocked her down and picked it up. Meanwhile, on the other side of the ring, Fallon Henley gets on the apron. She's distracting the referee, and then as Jordynne is Irish whipped into the ropes, Blake from the outside hits her in the back with the championship belt, and that leads right into Jacy hitting her finisher on Jordynne and getting the win and retaining the NXT Women's Championship. So Blake Monroe is officially back to being a heel. If you follow her career as Mariah May, especially in AEW, you know she is far better in the heel role, and it was only a matter of time before they put her in that role. I know she debuted with a lot of fanfare in NXT and has been feuding with Fatal Influence and has been positioned as a babyface, but you had to know that was only going to be short-lived, and it was just a matter of when, not if, she would turn on Jordynne Grace, and it happened here. So I imagine the two of them will clash in a match at some point on a future NXT show, maybe on their Heatwave show that got announced and is going to go head to head, or at least on the same day, around the same time, as AEW Forbidden Door, because WWE just can't help themselves. But maybe on a big show like that, that's where we'll get that match. But again, good match between JC and Jordan. The finish, a little bit predictable, only in that I figured Blake would cause some shenanigans here, but that's that. Up next was the Fatal 4-Way match for the Women's Tag Team Championships. The champions, Raquel Rodriguez and Roxanne Perez, the substitute for the injured Liv Morgan, defended their titles against a team from Raw, a team from SmackDown, and a team from NXT. In this case, it was the Kabuki Warriors, Asuka and Kairi Sane, Charlotte Flair and Alexa Bliss, and from NXT, Sol Ruca and Zarya. And in this match, man, Charlotte Flair, that was, for me, that was the story of the match. A complete 180 in terms of crowd reactions for Charlotte in comparison to when she returned at the beginning of the year after the Royal Rumble. I distinctively think about that episode of Raw coming out of the Rumble where she was making her return and she was pouring her heart out, talking about coming back from her injury, and the fans just showering her with boos and drowning her out to the point where she couldn't even talk. Or a lot of the build up to the match at WrestleMania with her and Tiffany Stratton, where again, she would be in front of crowds that just completely drowned her out and booed the hell out of her and wouldn't even let her speak and rattled her so badly to the point where she couldn't even talk. Meanwhile, all these months later, she's away from the World Championship and she's in this story where her and Alexa Bliss are reluctantly teaming up together. And you get to this show and she's one of, if not the most over person in this entire match and one of the most over people on the entire show itself. So that was a lot of fun to see. Very interesting. You know, when she got a hot tag at one point, the fans were going crazy for her. And of course, the fans also liked Alexa Bliss. They loved Asuka and Kairi together, especially Asuka. And Zarya didn't get much of a reaction. She got some reactions here and there for some of her power moves, but Sol Ruca was the star out of the two of them. And ironically, the ones who didn't get the biggest reaction were the ones who ended up winning the match, which was Roxanne Perez and Raquel Rodriguez. But this match was also fun. Fun chaos is what I like to call it. You know, you got 8 women out there. It's going to be chaotic at different points, and this one was no exception. One of the biggest highlights of the entire match was when Sol Ruca hit a soul snatcher on Charlotte Flair. That was very impressive. And then Sol and Zarya together teamed up on Alexa, and Sol held Alexa in a position where she was holding her arms back, and then she kind of kicked her up in position for Zarya to charge in and spear her. But when Alexa was up, Charlotte immediately pulled Alexa out of harm's way, and as Zarya was charging in, she accidentally hit Sol Ruca and speared the life out of her. Then they got a shot of Charlotte basically cradling Alexa in the corner. So I'm sure that will be a good story point for them to work off of going forward. But then Raquel and Roxanne came back in, cleared house. Raquel powerbombed Alexa out onto a pile of bodies on the floor. Roxanne dove out on the other side onto Charlotte. And then Raquel hit the Tejana bomb on Sol Ruca to get the 1-2-3. So Raquel and Roxanne keep the belts in the Judgment Day, who right now are dripping with gold, with Finn Balor and JD McDonough regaining the tag team titles, and of course Dom still the Intercontinental champion. So I imagine that group will keep those belts for a little bit longer. But this was a really good match, really fun match. Like I said, fun chaos. And again, one of the biggest stories of the match is the reaction to Charlotte, which was just unbelievable to see, seeing what kind of reactions that she was getting at the beginning of the year. So very cool. Up next, we had the WWE Women's Championship match as Tiffany Stratton defended her title against Trish Stratus. Trish is still in her 25th anniversary year. Of course, we saw these two team up earlier this year at the Elimination Chamber show. And so now we had a position here where Tiffany was granted the opportunity to pick her own opponent for this show, and she picked Trish. And these two had a very good match. Surprise, surprise. The crowd was really into it. They liked Tiffany. They loved themselves some Trish Stratus. Trish is not the same performer that she was in her prime, in her heyday, but she can still go out there and put on a damn good match. We've seen it in recent years with Charlotte Flair. We saw it with her and Becky Lynch, especially their steel cage match from a couple of years ago. And this one was no exception. I don't think this match was as good as those two matches that I just mentioned. The one with Charlotte at SummerSlam, I think 2019. The steel cage match with Becky, Payback 2023, I believe. So this wasn't as good as those, but this was still really good. And Trish hit a lot of her greatest hits. You know, the chick kick, the Hurricane Rana off the top. She did hit Stratisfaction at one point, but it was only good for a 2 count. She was able to block a prettiest moonsault ever from Tiffany Stratton, but then she went for a moonsault of her own, paying homage to Lita, as Michael Cole so eloquently put it. So she went for a moonsault, but Tiffany blocked that, and she went up top and finally connected with her prettiest moonsault ever and got the win. So the outcome was never in doubt, and this was a big legend for Tiffany to beat. You know, in this same calendar year, she owns pinfall victories over Charlotte Flair and Tiffany and Trish Stratus. So two of the biggest names in the history of the WWE Women's Division. Tiffany has clean pinfall victories over both of them in the same calendar year. So that's a great way to put her over strong. And she is set up to defend her title in a couple of weeks at SummerSlam against Jade Cargill. And speaking of that, the next matchup on this show was Jade Cargill and Naomi in a no-holds-barred match with Bianca Belair announced as the special guest referee on Saturday night's main event last night. Honestly, out of everything that happened in this match and on this show, one of the biggest, well, we learned kind of why by the end of the show, but up to this point, one of the biggest shocking elements of this show was the fact that Bianca just was the referee in this match. We didn't really get a spot in this match where she got in Jade's face and there was tension between the two of them. She didn't really get in Naomi's face at any point. We saw her show concern for both women at certain points in the match where she would lean in and ask them if they're okay, if they need help and all that kind of stuff. Other than that, she really didn't play much of a factor in this match. She didn't lean heavily one way or the other. She had no impact on the finish of this match. It was straight up Naomi and Jade kicking each other's asses, and they did. They brought out all the toys that you could expect. A lot of kendo sticks, steel chairs, tables, Slim Jim sponsored tables, by the way. We had a trash can. We had a damn toolbox was used in this match at one point. At one point, Jade, or I should say Naomi, drop kicked Jade into the side of the announce table that had the LED screen on it. So we had a little bit of smoke and debris pop up. So that was very interesting spot here. But of course, both women went through tables at one point or another. Jade got knocked into a table off of the apron, and Naomi went through a table for the finish as Naomi got hit with the Jaded off the top rope and crashed through a table, and that was all she wrote. 1, 2, 3, and Jade Cargill picks up the win. And it's funny because a lot of the matches that Jade has been having on TV recently have not been all that impressive, and she herself has not looked all that great in some of these matches, but I gotta say here, she looked great. This was one of the best matches of her entire career. And it's funny because earlier this year at WrestleMania, the first match with Naomi was already one of the best matches of her career. So Naomi is a great dance partner for Jade, but we'll see how she goes at it with Tiffany at SummerSlam in a few weeks. And as for Bianca, I'm not really sure where they go with her, especially now with what they did with Naomi. I'm very curious to see how that develops, but we'll see. We had the Women's Battle Royal up next on the show, where the winner would receive a championship match at Clash in Paris coming up in August at the end of the month. So I'm not going to go through all the names in this match. You had people from Raw, you had people from SmackDown. Nikki Bella was in this match. She was like the one lone legend in this match. You had some people from NXT like Jada Parker, Kehlani Jordan, Lash Legend, who got a huge spotlight in this match. She was one of the final people in the entire match. Kehlani Jordan had one of those old Kofi Kingston Royal Rumble spots where she got thrown out, but her feet never touched the ground, so she had to do a fancy move to get back into the ring, and she kind of walked on her hands, did a handstand, and get back in the ring, so that was pretty cool. You had Nikki Bella mixing it up with Chelsea Green and her Secret Hervis, so I don't know if maybe they're going to head in a direction where Nikki Bella goes at it with Chelsea Green, and that's going to be the replacement feud for Nikki on TV, since the direction with her and Liv Morgan got shut down due to Liv's injury. But that was something to take note of in this match. But it ultimately came down to Nia Jax, Lash Legend, and Stephanie Vaquer. And Stephanie and Lash were able to take out Nia, and it came down to the two of them, and they both tumbled over the top rope out onto the apron, and that's where we see Stephanie hit the Devil's Kiss on Lash Legend and dumps her to the floor, and she wins the Battle Royal, and she is set up for a Women's World Championship match at Clash in Paris. She was even interviewed after the match by Stephanie McMahon, no doubt for the reason of wanting the visual of Stephanie interviewing Stephanie. Stephanie McMahon even spoke Spanish to Stephanie Vaquer, who also, of course, spoke Spanish, but, you know, she spoke English too. So she got a little pretty good promo, and she is all set up for a championship match in Paris. And I'll say it right now, I think she might win. As great of a moment as it was for Naomi on this show, I think we are going to see that moment short-lived, and Stephanie might immediately get crowned at Clash in Paris. Either that, or they'll hold off and they'll just have Naomi lose to Rhea in Perth, Australia in October. I don't know. It could be either one. But, of course, speaking of all this, that leads us to the main event. And I already talked about it at the top of the video with Naomi cashing in Money in the Bank, but before that, Iyo and Rhea for the Women's World Championship were having a damn good match. This was a great main event. It started a little slow, but it was picking up very quickly. The two of them were going back and forth. We got a ref bump in this match as Iyo hit a springboard drop kick and Rhea ducked it. So Iyo connected with the referee. And immediately you see the people in the crowd, they're looking around, they're thinking someone's going to come out, they're thinking someone's going to interfere. And that's not what happened at all. Instead, Iyo and Rhea just brawled out into the crowd. And it led to a cool spot where Iyo dove off of like a bunch of production crates or something like that, and she just hit a huge crossbody down onto Rhea. So that was pretty cool. But meanwhile, they do get back to ringside, they get back in the ring, and they're both up top. And Iyo hits a huge Spanish fly, and both women are down. And that is what led to Naomi coming out with her own referee. She officially cashed in. The match was made into a triple threat, and once that bell rang, Naomi clocked Iyo right in the face with the briefcase. She got in the ring, she dumped Rhea out, and then she hit a split-legged moonsault on Iyo and pinned her to win the Women's World Championship. In a year where Naomi is having a career-defining year, she is putting on some of her best work. Her in-ring work is spot on. Her character work is unbelievable. Her character can be a little over-the-top, cartoony villain sometimes, especially with her maniacal laugh and all that, but I'm enjoying it. I love the hell out of her and her character right now, so she's doing some great work, in my opinion. And to have her be in this position where on a big show like this and with a big spotlight all on the women, the show ends and closes with her standing tall as the champion like that, I thought that was a hell of a moment for her to have. So kudos on that. And again, a huge surprise because maybe some other people predicted it or could see a scenario like this going down. I genuinely never once considered Naomi cashing in her briefcase on Iyo or Rhea or anyone holding the Raw Championship. So I'm assuming this effectively will transition Naomi over to Raw. I also assume that's why the finish to her and Jade's match ended as cleanly as it did, because it looks like that is the end of that for now. And anything they do in the future will just be between Jade and Bianca. Maybe Jade's going to win the championship at SummerSlam and we get Jade and Bianca for that championship at some point in the future. I don't know. But as for Naomi, and it was also a nice touch because after Naomi lost, she got her ass kicked in that match. So when she came out to cash in the briefcase, she had a bandage over her nose. Her nose was bloody. She looked like she had already been in a war. And so she came out to cash in and won the championship. So hell of a moment for her. I loved that. That was a nice touch at the end there. So again, I'm not sure where this leads to for Rhea and Iyo. Maybe this sets up a proper triple threat match for SummerSlam. I'd have to assume it would. And there's also now a story with Rhea having yet again failed to beat Iyo Sky. The match was interrupted. She couldn't do it, but you know, you look at the record. Once again, Rhea Ripley fails to beat Iyo. So I say before Rhea can ever really get another shot at the championship, she's got to get that monkey off her back first. So it doesn't look like there's too much dissension between the two of them, because after the show was over, they kept the cameras rolling. So you saw Rhea and Iyo, they hugged, they walked basically hand in hand to the back. So that was all she wrote with that. But again, I assume we might get a triple threat with all three of these women again at SummerSlam. And that should be a good match. But very happy for Naomi. A very great moment for her. And again, I do not really like the Money in the Bank concept like I used to. But every now and then, they can put on a really cool surprise here. And this was great. This is a great way to end what was top to bottom the best WWE, PLE, special event, whatever you want to call it, their best show of the entire year. Even better than WrestleMania. Both nights, individually and combined, this show, top to bottom, was one of the most fun watches I have had of a WWE show all year. There's been some good Raw shows, a few good SmackDown shows, not too many of them, but a few good ones. Some of the earlier PLEs like the Rumble and even Elimination Chamber, which up to this point was probably the best show of the year for them. But this one, this was great. So hats off to all the ladies on this show for working their asses off. And we'll see where things lead now heading into SummerSlam. They also made an announcement for Monday Night Raw tomorrow night, where there's going to be a gauntlet match to determine the number one contender for Gunther's World Championship with CM Punk, LA Knight, Penta, Jey Uso, and Braun Breaker. I have CM Punk winning that. We'll see how things shape up as we head into SummerSlam, the first two-night SummerSlam. But until then, thank you guys for tuning into this video. Thank you for tuning in to my All-In review yesterday, and thank you for just coming to the channel for this wrestling coverage on this very busy weekend. I will be back with you guys very soon. Till next time, take care.